tonight we're going to hear about the Grand Canyon, and Barry and Jen are going to be talking about 6 different ways that you might see the Grand Canyon. So this is an opportunity to think about what you want to do, what you might want to see when you go or the next time you go to the canyon. It should be quite interesting. Jen and Barry are longtime rovers, as most people know. Jen's been a rover since 2007, including 10 years on the board, and Barry's been a member since 2005 and has been on the board for 12 years, including he's the outgoing president right now. They both enjoy camping, hiking, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, and playing pickleball. Jen and Barry have enjoyed going to the canyon and have experienced the many options of hiking and backpacking on or below the rim. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Okay, thank you. Apologies for hearing from me so much tonight, but that's the way it goes. So let's get right into this. Okay, so 6 different Grand Canyon trip options. We've been there quite a few times and done a lot of different trips, so we wanted to just offer up some different alternatives. If you don't know the Grand Canyon that well, it's 277 miles long, and this is kind of what it looks like. So you've got Lake Powell up at the northeast, and it flows from there to Lake Mead in the southwest. And near the southwest, you've got Vegas, which is one place to get, particularly to the North Rim. Another place to get to the South Rim would be to fly into Phoenix and go up there. You have Flagstaff down here, which is a good place to stay to access the South Rim. And then up to the north, you have Fredonia, Arizona, and Kanab, Utah, where there's hotels. And there's also hotels, I think, closer in too. And you can see there's a number of different places in here, which we're going to talk about. South Rim, North Rim, Havasupai Reservation, Walapai Reservation. And if you look at this little red bit here, so this is where the North Rim area is, this red piece, and this is where the South Rim area is. And most people that go to the Grand Canyon, I don't know what the percentage is, but most go just to this South Rim area. So you got 277 miles of canyon. Most people go to this little bit right here. So that's kind of interesting. So there's a lot of other options. So first I'm going to talk about hiking on the South Rim or the North Rim. So if you want to have a real simple trip, you can just drive into the South Rim or the North Rim. You pay your $35, which gives you a pass for 7 days, or if you've got a lifetime pass, you can use that. And so you could go to both rims if you wanted to. You could just go in for a day trip, just drive in and drive out, or you could camp or use a cabin or lodge. And then if you stay up on the rim, you've got level hiking, you've got great views and a lot of wildlife sightings. So for the South Rim, it's a 3.5 hour drive from Phoenix. The best time to visit pretty much is any time, but you will get snow in winter at some time, but it's not normally too bad. You might have a little bit of driving on snow and hiking on snow. And there's a lot of wildlife, and we can show you pictures of some of them, but you can see a list of them there, the different things. Lots of lizards, but there's various other things there too, which I can show you some pictures of. So this is what the South Rim looks like. So you drive up from the south. You can also drive in from the east over here where it says the desert view. And there's actually 13 miles of trails just on the rim without even going into the canyon. So you can do a really long day hike here and you get different views, and it changes as you go along the trail. They have fresh water there, and they don't sell bottled water, so you can just bring a water bottle and fill it up. This is what the trail looks like. It's pretty easy going, but you can go a long way, so you can definitely get a workout. They also have a shuttle bus, so if you hike 10 miles and you don't want to hike 10 miles back, you can hop on the shuttle bus, which is really nice. So here's just some of the views. This is the view from the east end of the South Rim, Yaqui Point. You can see there's a lot of areas. This is Mojave Point, a lot of areas where you can go right out on the edge and look over the edge. This is Yavapai Point, and Jen's going to talk a little more about the Plateau Point Trail, which you can see right down here. it's really cool to be up on the rim and looking down at trails that you've been on that are way down in the canyon, and vice versa. This is a view of the Bright Angel Lodge. So as you go along the trails, you get to look back and you can see some different viewpoints. And this is also, and you see some little people here. This is also the Bright Angel Trail. It goes through the tunnel here. And then on this one, you can see it goes zigzags here. And then you've got the switchbacks down here. This is a real killer when you're coming up. But yeah, it's cool to look down on the trail. So this is from Maricopa Point, and if you look out there, you can see there's a storm over there on the plateau, and particularly if you go in July, August, the monsoon time, you may see some interesting storms over the canyon. This is Mojave Point, and then now you can see the river. Most of the time you can't see the river from the rim, but every now and then as you walk along the trails, you'll get glimpses of it, and pretty good views in this case. This is Monument Creek Vista. And this is the Monument Creek Trail. And right here, you can actually see there's some pretty good rapids right down there that the rafts go through. This is Pima Point, and this is a good one for sunsets. Sunrise and sunsets are particularly good times to take photographs, but sometimes it's not convenient because you're not there yet or you're having breakfast or whatever, but it is a good time to get out there. At the west end of the South Rim, there's Hermits Rest, and there's these really nice iconic buildings in the Grand Canyon, and a lot of them were designed by Mary Coulter, who was an architect back in the early 1900s, and she actually lived in St. Paul for quite a while. So this is one of her buildings. There's a couple of other buildings here that she designed, like Phantom Ranch, and she actually came up with the name Phantom Ranch. It was going to be Roosevelt Chalet, but she came up with Phantom Ranch, which I think is a little more interesting. Some of the critters you get there, ravens, you hear them and see them a lot. Vultures and also condors. If you get lucky, I have seen a condor there down in the canyon, maybe not up on the rim. Also, there's elk, which aren't native to the South Rim, but they have been showing up there. And here's a bull elk we saw, and there's another elk there living on the edge, so to speak. And this is the evilest of the animals, apparently, because a lot of people get bitten by the rock squirrel. So they come looking for food, and if people feed them, sometimes they'll bite right into your finger because they got very sharp teeth. So you got to watch out for these little guys. Cute, but can be bad. So the North Rim, if you want to go to the North Rim, you can get there from Vegas. You could drive around from the South Rim. So it's 4.5 hours from Vegas. The best time to visit is summer and fall because it's actually closed in the winter. The facilities close on October 15th. You can still access the rim, but they don't clear the snow. So once it gets snowed in, it's you're basically done. And it actually closes at the end of October. It does actually close at some point officially. May 15th is due to open each year, but if they get a ton of snow, it may not even open on May 15th. So you got to watch out for that. Here's a map of the North Rim. The North Rim is different to the South Rim because there's not just one trail you can hike along the rim. You come in this side over here. The North Rim Visitor Center is here, but there's 20 miles of road around the North Rim to get to the different trails. You can still do a lot of hiking, but there's a lot of driving between the trails. Other driving is pretty interesting too. So that's kind of the layout of the North Rim. And here's some of the hikes. There's a lot of trees up on the North Rim, more probably than the South Rim. So there's some nice, somewhat shady hikes. Here, this is called Angel's Window. You can see there's a hole right through the rock there, which is kind of cool. So this is a view from Cape Royal, and this is called Woton's Throne. This big rocky obelisk or whatever you want to call it. Now this is looking across from the North Rim, from Cape Royal again to the South Rim. And if you look in the distance there, if you see this little peak here, well, it's not that little. This is actually the San Francisco peaks, and this is Mount Humphries, which is the highest peak in Arizona at 12.6, I think it is. And I did actually hike up there once, and you can look back and see the Grand Canyon from up there. Bright Angel Point. You can see people on the end there. This guy is really neat. This is the Kaibab squirrel. It only occurs up on the North Rim, and it looks kind of like a ghost. And they also have bison up now on the North Rim. And these, the ones here were introduced, but they are actually native because they were here hundreds of years ago. Jen.
So the option 2 is the rim to river to rim. Most people don't do it from the North Rim. This is from the south. We did this in late November. The best times is probably May, October through November. We hiked for about 14 miles. For multi-days, you're going to have to do a backcountry permit, and they don't recommend doing this in one day, but we did it late. We started down here on the South Kaibab Trail and headed towards the river, past Skeleton Point to the river, and then back up the Bright Angel. Most people do it this way because there's water points and restrooms on the way up the Bright Angel. Plus, South Kaibab is pretty steep. The Bright Angel isn't as steep. And then we ended at the Bright Angel Trailhead. It took us about 3 hours to go down and 5.5 hours to come up. It was a pretty challenging hike. So we got there early, got on the shuttle bus to get out to the South Kaibab Trailhead. 6.3 miles down. There's signs all over the place. What goes down must come back up. Make sure you know that you can hike up, because hiking down is easy, except for on your knees probably. And here you can see how steep it is right away on the South Kaibab Trail. It's a pretty interesting picture because it's just switchback after switchback. The trail is really well marked because this is one of the corridor trails. So a lot of people go on this. Skeleton Point, there's actually a sign saying that 6 wooden signs have been stolen. Do not steal signs. Here's another shot of some of the steep trails. The first glimpse of the river is down here. It was a really beautiful day. We started in the upper 30s and we got down to the river and it was about 60. This is the Bright Angel Campground, which is on the north side of the river, North Rim side of the river. We're not going to camp there, but it was an interesting to see the campground from above. We're just right above the Black Bridge, and you can see the Silver Bridge over here. And this is the Black Bridge that we're heading over. And as you can see, this is a Black Bridge up here. The Silver Bridge is just right over here. It's not that far away. We had lunch here we stayed here for about a half hour and had lunch. We put our feet in and the water was cold. But a lot of rafters come through here and just have a break, or I'm not sure I don't think they can camp here, but. And then up the Bright Angel Trail is 9.5 miles, but it's not as steep, but it's still as steep. Sometimes you have to cross over some streams or just, go on the rocks or through the water. It's not usually that deep. And some switchbacks. Indian Garden is about halfway up, and that's a good spot to rest or get some more water. And you get here, and it's like, how am I going to get up to the South Rim? But there's some switchbacks there, and you can see the little people. You could just so tiny.
Okay, so another trip we did was driving around the entire Grand Canyon. And we came up with this based on this book, which someone gave to us. A rover gave this book to us, and it shows different iconic points around the canyon where people have taken photographs over the years from, starting in the late 1800s. So this gave us the idea to do this trip. So we went into Phoenix, like we usually do. My sister lives there, so there's a free place to stay for one night. And then we drove up and we stayed in Flagstaff, went to the South Rim, drove up to Page, went to the North Rim, drove around this side to Vegas so we could get around the other side of the canyon. Then went to Peach Springs on the Walapai Reservation, went to Grand Canyon West, and then on that day we drove all the way back to Prescott, went for a little hike, and then went back to Phoenix. So it was it was kind of a week-long trip, and you could definitely take longer and do more stuff on your way around. Best time to do this kind of trip would probably be summer or fall. In the winter, you couldn't get to the North Rim and you may have snow on the roads. Monsoon season could be interesting because they have a lot of afternoon storms coming through at that time. So you may be able to get some good photographs of storms coming through. But you really have to be careful with those because every now and then someone gets struck by lightning at the Grand Canyon. So the storms can be pretty quick and pretty fierce. So the first day we went from Phoenix to Flagstaff. And along the way, we went on a bit of the Arizona Trail. And I don't know whether you guys are familiar with this, but it comes all the way from Mexico, all the way to Utah, and it actually goes right through the Grand Canyon. So it's a trail you could through hike, which would be fun. But we did a little hike on there for an hour or so. And then we went out to Flagstaff. We stayed in the Monte Vista Hotel. And if you've ever been to Flagstaff, or if you haven't, you should check this out. It's a historic hotel where a lot of movie stars have stayed when they've been filming Westerns. They have little rooms, but it's right downtown, and it's kind of interesting. Next day, we went from Flagstaff up to the South Rim, which is hour and 19 minutes or so. Not too bad. And I'm not going to show a lot of pictures from the South Rim because I already did that, but just to show, here's the campground. We did camp there, and from there you can walk to the rim, and it's a pretty nice campground. And there we saw elk in the campground, and I saw a woman taking a selfie with an elk, which was interesting. And so we stayed at the South Rim in the campground. So on this trip, we did campground, hotel. So every other night we could get a decent night's sleep. So from the South Rim, we then drove up to Page, which we'd never been to before, and went to a couple of stops along the way. So one of them within the Grand Canyon is Desert View. This is another building designed by Mary Coulter. It's designed with the Pueblo Indians in mind with their style of building. It was built in 1932. And there's some nice, it's an interesting building to go in, and then there's some nice views from the outside, and a nice view of the river down in the canyon there. Next, we went and looked at the Little Colorado, which is this, which flows into the Colorado. And right now you can see there's just a few puddles down there, but obviously in monsoon season, when it rains, you know, it can turn into a pretty mighty river pretty quick. Obviously, it must get pretty big to have carved out this whole ravine. And then we went to this place that we hadn't been before, and you can see the crowds of people here. So this is Horseshoe Bend, and you pay $10 to park a vehicle here, and it's run by the city of Page. So I'm sure they make a ton of money off of this. So this is what the Horseshoe Bend looks like. It's really fantastic to be there and look at it. The scary thing though, there was a lot of young people sitting on the edge with their dangling their legs over there, and I was really worried we were going to see someone fall because it's just straight down, but it's quite impressive to see. And then this is Glen Canyon Dam. So this is Lake Powell behind here. So this is the very start of the Grand Canyon right here. And that's right in Page. It was right next to the hotel we stayed at. So we stayed in Page for $156, which wasn't too bad. It was a pretty good hotel. The next day, we went from Page to the north rim of the Grand Canyon and went to some different sites along the way. We went out to Antelope Point, and you can pay for a trip out there and they'll take you out in a Jeep out in the desert, but that costs a lot of money and takes time. So we didn't do that. So we just drove out ourselves. And there's some interesting rock formations when you go out there. There's a lot of, I'm sure this is sandstone, different sandstone formations here. And this, I believe, is Vermilion Cliffs, which was mentioned in the book. This long line of cliffs along here. And then this was the original road bridge, which is now called the Navajo Bridge, and it's a pedestrian bridge. And this is the road bridge now on the left here. And then you can see the river in the canyon there. So now we're crossing back over to the north part of the canyon. And there's a lot of nice, interesting views out here. I love driving through the desert. You can drive at 65 miles an hour quite easily and see some nice views. And here's balanced rocks. You end up with these rocks sitting on pedestals. And then we went up to the North Rim. And again, I've shown you a lot of pictures from the North Rim. So I'm just going to show you a couple here. So this is where we camped. This was a really nice campsite. It was pretty warm. This was in September when we were there. It was actually pretty warm. Then when we went down to the rim, this is Desert View Tower from the North Rim that we saw earlier at the South Rim. And that's 10 miles away. You can look straight across there. It's kind of cool when you can actually see something you recognize. And then we went to the lodge. There's a lodge there where you can get dinner and drinks. And it's really nice for sitting out there and looking at the stars. And sometimes they have astronomy programs there. Next day, we went from the North Rim to all the way around to Vegas. We didn't do much that day except a lot of driving, 4.5 hours. And you can see as we're coming into Vegas. But we did a quick side trip because we were staying with a friend of ours, and he wasn't going to be back till the evening. So we went up to the Spring Mountains near Vegas and went for a hike up there. So like I said, you could expand this trip if you wanted to do it and do a lot of other stuff. The next day was kind of an easy day because we got a late start. We only were driving 2.5 hours, and we went from Vegas to Pinch Springs on the Walapai Reservation. We went past Lake Mead, and you could go to Hoover Dam there if you want to. We've been there before, so that was somewhere where you could definitely include. And then we went to the hotel on the reservation and in Peach Springs, and it was $160 a night, and it's a pretty decent hotel, and it's got a restaurant which is okay. The vegetarian options weren't great, but it's the only restaurant within probably 100 miles and hotel, so you can't complain too much. So we had a restful day there that day, and then the next day this was a crazy driving day. We went from Peach Springs and we drove up to the West Rim, and that's where there's the Skywalk, which you might have heard about, and I'll show you some pictures of it in a minute here. There's a gravel road that we had to drive up. Those, I believe, are Joshua trees. It's kind of cool to see. We also saw road runners running across the road. So this is the Grand Canyon West Rim, and I just checked on the website, and I love the way they price this. You can do the Grand package, the Grander package, the Grandest package, or the Grandiose package, which I thought was pretty cool. Or you can just do pay the entry fee, which is $40 or something. We did this one, which was just general admission and the Skywalk. This includes a meal. This includes helicopter flight, pontoon rides. This one includes whitewater rafting. So there's a lot of different options here, and it's actually pretty well organized. You park, they've got a shuttle bus, which takes you where you need to go. That's where the helicopters are for the helicopter rides. You can do horse rides. And we also saw some pronghorn antelope here, which I have never seen before. So it was kind of cool to see them in the wild. I've never seen them in the wild before. I've seen them at Minnesota Zoo, but that's not quite the same. So this is the Skywalk. And the Skywalk is basically a glass platform, 4,000 feet above the canyon. You walk out on the glass. All you've got under your feet is glass. And you can see actually ravens flying underneath your feet as you look down, which is kind of cool. Now, the thing about this is they don't let you take a camera out on the platform or even a cell phone. They make you put everything in lockers. So if you want a photograph out there, they have to take it and you have to pay them for it. And we weren't going to do that. So we faked a photograph off the platform, and you can see the river down there. But it is kind of cool to go down there. I know it's a little controversial. They have a cafe there where you can get your meal called the Guano Cafe, which I'm not sure is the best name for a cafe, but the reason it's called that is because this is Guano Point, which is another thing that's mentioned in the book. So there was a cave there where bats were nesting for hundreds or thousands of years, and they actually started mining guano there, and there's still some of the equipment left there. But it's also a nice viewpoint where you get a view down into the canyon, and you can see the river down there and a couple of ravens. The next, oh, this isn't the next day. This is the same day. So the same day we went from Grand Canyon down to Prescott, went for a hike, and then back to Phoenix. So that was like a 7-hour driving day as well as the hiking and stuff. But the really cool thing about it was we hiked around a reservoir, and then we saw this guy. This is a road runner. It was running ahead of us down the trail or trotting. And every time it stopped, it would lift its tail, and then it would start trotting again. And it was just really, really cool to see this guy. We hadn't seen a road runner close up before, and they're really, really pretty birds. So, okay.
It was so fun. Technical
There we go.
difficulties. So the fourth option is rim to rim. So it was 4 nights in the canyon and 5 days. We did this in early October 2015. You do need a backcountry permit. Anytime you're going to be camping below the rim, you need a permit. We also did the shuttle because we didn't really want to rent 2 cars and shuttle ourselves. So we paid $90 each to have someone drive us over to the North Rim. Best times it's probably early May or in October. We hiked 24 miles, but we also did some side hikes that I'm not including in that total. So the backcountry permit application process is crazy. 1 application is accepted per group, and each group is either a small group or a large group. 1 to 6 people for a small group. Large groups are 7 to 11. You have to stay in the same campsite with your group. And for large groups, there's group sites. You fax the application about 5 months ahead of time, or mail it to the Backcountry Information Center. It's not accepted by phone or email. And how to better your chances of getting permits, you list multiple itineraries on the application that would work for you and flexible dates. The corridor campsites are the hardest to get because they're most popular. So if we wanted to go in October, we would either fax in our application or mail it in between May 20th and June 1st. And if we actually lived down there and could get in there, the first available we could do is July 1st. And it's really random. They just basically use a computer program, and it just picks one and says, okay, this person has this itinerary, they got it, and until it's all full. Corridor Trail is North Rim down to Cottonwood is 6.8 miles, then down to Bright Angel, another 7.2, and then up the South Rim to Indian Garden, and then to the South Rim. So just about 24 miles. The reason why most people do north to south is because the North Kaibab Trail is 1,000 feet higher than the South Trail. And most people, when they go down the South Kaibab Trail, they'll head up the Bright Angel Trail, even though it's longer, but it's less steep. In the backcountry office, you can weigh your bag. This is Barry's bag, which is about 26, 27 pounds. Mine was always a little bit less. This is our shuttle from the South Rim to the North Rim. They throw all of our bags up on top, and we're crammed into this van, about 208 miles, almost a 4-hour drive, but we stop a couple times for snacks or toilet breaks. Here's the Navajo Bridge that Barry showed, crossing the Colorado River. And we're just getting into the North Rim. We had a campsite up the North Rim. We stayed there the first night. We booked a campsite rather than using the backcountry sites, which we could have used, but because we didn't know much about it, we decided we would definitely want to get a spot. It was pretty cool up there, so we had bought sweatshirts just so we could throw it away, but we ended up keeping them. We had met a couple people from Hungary in the shuttle, and coincidentally, they started their hike at the same time. We're heading to Cottonwood, which is 6.8 miles. North Kaibab Trail. This is Havasupai Tunnel. And I like this view from the north because you can see the trail that you're going to be walking on. And there's just so many different layers of rocks. There's signs that you can learn about the rocks, but I have not included them in the presentation. Bridges that make that where you can cross instead of going all the way up and down and up. The trail gets narrow in parts, but I've never felt like I was going to fall off. But you definitely want to watch where you're stepping. This is the composting toilet at Cottonwood. They're pretty nice. And this is our campsite. This one had a picnic bench behind where I'm standing, but here's an ammo box where you could put your food. And you can barely see our tent from the trail. Second day, we did Cottonwood to Bright Angel. We always started early so we could get to the next campsite around lunchtime. I liked this day just because it was long, but it was also a box canyon, which is pretty cool. We're following a stream. And this retaining wall, there was a lot of work put into it. Looks like there's a newer part over on the left side. We're getting to Bright Angel Camp. And this is the Bright Angel campground that we saw from above previously. Some people sit and put their feet in the water. It is still pretty cool. Our campsite was kind of off the trail, so it was kind of more private. Each of the corridor trail campsites also have this post where you can hang your backpacks and protect them from the rock squirrels that do visit. These are our friends from Hungary. They did not pack lights. They have a full backgammon board. We did some side hikes. And there's a lot of cactus along the way as well. Our third day, we went from Bright Angel Campground to Indian Garden, up the Bright Angel Trail. We're heading over the Silver Bridge again. So this is a trip we've done many times. So I'm just going to page through these. Got to Indian Garden, to our next campsite. And we did do a side hike out to Plateau Point. It's 1.5 miles each way, and it's a really nice place to go if you're staying at Indian Garden, or even a day trip down in the canyon. You can see that we did this at sunset, so you can see the colors. The Colorado's down there. And we had forgotten our headlight. So on the way back, it was getting kind of dark. So here's where Indian Garden is, where the trees are. So we got to the campsite and it was really dark. We heard something in the campsite. So we got our lights, or we flashed the camera. I'm not sure what we did, but there were deer in our campsite. And later in a little bit, we had been eating, and all of a sudden I heard something behind me again. So I flashed my flashlight there and we saw a skunk. No pictures though. Next day we did Indian Garden to South Rim, 4.9 miles. And this here is where Indian Garden is. And you can see the trail out to Plateau Point from here. And we saw some lizards. So that was pretty cool.
Okay, so another trip one can do is going down to Supai in the Grand Canyon. I think this place is really magical. So here's the South Rim and North Rim over here. Supai is over here, and it's the Havasupai reservation. I don't know why they call the area where you get into it the Walapai Hilltop, which is a different tribe, different group of Native Americans. But anyway, Supai is home to the Havasupai people. There's about 650 people live down in there. 100% of them speak the Havasupai dialect, and they've lived in the Grand Canyon for about 1,000 years. So it's kind of I think it's an interesting story. So here's a picture from, I think it's from years ago, but I thought it's kind of a cute picture. So when would you want to go here? I think September, October, November is probably the best. Summer, it's going to be hot down there, but the hiking isn't too bad, and there's a creek you can put yourself in, so it's not as bad. July, August is the monsoon season down there. You may get rain, and also they have had a couple of bad flood events over the years. So there's always that risk, though it doesn't happen every year for sure. Spring is busiest because of spring break or whatever. So that's kind of the busy time. Other Supai information. So from where you park your car down to the village is 8 miles. From the village down to the campground is another 2 miles. And from that village to the Colorado River is 10 miles. In the village, there's a lodge you can stay at, and there's a campground 2 miles below the village. Now, if you want to go down here at all, it's not a national park, it's a reservation, so you need a permit even to hike down there. And they have the rule that you should have no alcohol, drugs, firearms, and there's no fires allowed down there. So here we are at Walapai Hilltop, starting a hike down. You can see the hiking trail there. You go down and then hang a right and go along the wash. They do have mules going up and down. In fact, most of the stuff, most of the food and everything, and the US mail that goes into Supai goes on mule. They also have helicopters, but that's only for stuff that you can't get on a mule. And the difference with the mules here than the South Rim is they don't tie them all together. So the mules know where they're going and they just wander up and there they go. And the first time I went down there, I thought I was hearing a flash flood and I got really worried, but it was just the mules and some of the horses too, galloping down the wash. So it's not as, they're not all tied together like they are at the South Rim. And here's the trail down the wash, some really nice rock formations. And as you get further down, there's a creek, and so you get more trees and stuff. So you get to Supai, which is the village, and you get all this sandstone around there. You get a lot of shade. There's a lot of big trees down there. They also have irrigation ditches, but a lot of those, last time we were down, they'd been washed away by the floods, and they haven't redug them. You can see there's these huge cottonwood trees down there. There's also this plant all over the place down there. Now, this is interesting. This rock formation with these two things sticking up is called Wig Lever, and it has spiritual significance for the tribe. So it's kind of interesting to see this. And there it is from another angle. And here you can see they've got some fencing around where they've got a horse or mule in there. They do like their animals. And there's cats, dogs, mules, and other stuff down there. Even a raven, but that's not a pet. And then there was these cats outside the cafe. So there is a cafe down there where you can get a meal. The selection is somewhat limited because everything comes in on a mule. And they close fairly early. So we didn't always go there because we were too busy until late. They also have a grocery store there where you can buy basic stuff. This is the lodge. I've stayed in the campground and we've stayed in the lodge a couple of times. What we did is we took dried meals down there on a stove and then we cooked up sitting out on these benches. And it's just beautiful sitting out here and looking around at the scenery. And this is what the room's like. It's not the Ritz, but it's not too bad after a long day's hiking, that's for sure.
It has a shower.
Yeah, it's got a shower. So below Supai, you can hike down to the campground. There's these awesome waterfalls along the way. We saw some people doing stuff like, I wouldn't do that personally because I think I'd slip on the rock before I was ready and whack myself on the rock on the way down. Some of these waterfalls aren't even there anymore because after they get floods, the waterfalls change. This is Havasu Falls, which is 120 feet high. What's really nice is getting in the water and you can swim up to the waterfall and you're basically just swimming in place. The water's not super cold and it's not really warm. It's just kind of nice. Here's the campground from up above. There's a lot of trees down there. So there's a lot of shade. You can see the creek runs through the campground, picnic benches. Now it did change between when I first went down and went down later after there had been a flood and the creek had changed direction and some of the camp sites had moved. This is my son when we went down there. We didn't take a tent the first time because normally it's if you go at the right time. If it's not monsoon, it's dry, it's warm, and you really don't need to schlep a tent down there just for no good reason. So at the end of the campground, as you go further down, there's Mooney Falls. And they're named Mooney Falls because a guy called Mooney tried to get down the falls when there wasn't really a trail down there, and his rope broke or something, and he actually got killed. And he wasn't, his body wasn't even pulled out of there for a while because no one could get down there. So Mooney Falls is 180 feet high. And now there's a trail down there, and it's still not a walk in the park. You have to go through a cave. There's another view of the falls. And then you go down this walkway, and there's chains to hang on to, which the first time I went down there wasn't much of a problem because it was nice and dry. But then when I went down there later, everything was slippery and wet, and it was a lot harder holding on to the chains and going down there. Here you can see people going down the trail. And then when you get down there, especially if it's hot, you can go in the spray from the falls or go under the falls and cool off. Another view of the falls. So then if you keep going down from Mooney Falls, you can go down to Beaver Falls. And if you see this little map here, so Supai is further up this way. The campground's right here by Mooney Falls. If you keep going down, you get to Beaver Falls. And right near Beaver Falls is the edge of the reservation, and then you're into the national park. And if you keep hiking down, you can get down to the river, but there's nowhere to camp along the way. So once you leave the campground, there's nowhere you can legally stay down there. So it's 10 miles. If you're in the village, it's 10 miles down, 10 miles back. So it's a 20-mile round trip hike, which we did, and it was a full day hike. So here's some of the trails along the way. You get a lot of shade, a lot of stuff growing there. I don't know what Jen was laughing about, but we had to cross the river. Actually, when you go down to the Colorado River, you have to cross the creek about 10 times on the way down. But it's a nice way to cool off if it's hot anyway. And the falls are beautiful. This is like, I don't know, fairyland or Lord of the Rings or something. It's just so beautiful down there. It's amazing. That's Jen lost in the foliage. Okay, so this is, I think, a funny story. So we tried to go to the Colorado River the first time we were down there, and we couldn't make it. We got to this point, it's like, well, where do we go now? I don't know. So then we got back, and then we bought the guidebook to tell us how to go there. We should have bought it ahead of time. And it said, when you see this palm tree, which is really unusual in the Grand Canyon because they're not native, to the left, there's a rope. And if you look at this photo carefully, we'd both taken photos of it, and in our photos was a rope, but we hadn't seen it when we were there. So that's the way to continue from that point, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then they replaced it with a ladder. So now there's a ladder up there, but it is a little, you got to be a little careful going up there, but this is the only scary point. Okay, and this is by Beaver Falls. They've got a nice new picnic bench the second time we went down there. So yeah, there's a lot of pretty waterfalls down there. And you can see them. I just took a lot of photos of these. Okay, so when I've told people I've been to the Grand Canyon a lot of times, I think people always worry about the wrong things. And one thing they worry about is snakes. And I've been there over 10 times, and this is the first time I saw a snake. And this is a California king snake, and it's not actually poisonous. It was just coming to say hi, and it's kind of cute looking. So you very rarely see snakes down there. And then from Beaver Falls, we went all the way to the Colorado River, and you can see we're following the creek all the way down. We go through a little cave here. Now you get to a certain point. So we left the campground. There were people in the campground. We didn't see anyone for the next few hours until we got to here. And then suddenly there's a mass of people because people going rafting down the Colorado, they pull up their rafts and they come up here to swim, because you can't really swim in the Colorado because it's like 50 degrees. And this creek is pretty nice. So you get a lot of people coming up here to swim. And we swam in there too. So we go down there, there's crowds of people, and there's a bighorn sheep, male bighorn sheep right in the middle of everyone. I'm like, oh, this isn't going to end well. If the bighorn sheep can't find a way out, it's going to make a way out. But luckily it hopped over the creek, and next thing it was up on the hill. Because bighorn sheep, if they butt you, it can be pretty darn serious. So it got away. Good. So this is the end of the creek where it goes into a canyon before it gets into the Colorado River. There's some dory boats that are pulled up in there. And then here there's an inflatable, and now you can see the creek going into the river. So the creek's like azure blue, and then the Colorado River's kind of dirty brown. So it's kind of interesting to see that. And there's more of the Colorado River. And now the bad news, maybe I've got you really interested and you want to go to Supai. It's actually closed till at least June 2022 because of COVID. A lot of people, unfortunately, in the village have diabetes because of, a lot of reasons. But so that the canyon is closed, the Supai is closed till June 2022 at least. But if you ever get a chance to go down there, if you haven't been down there before, I definitely would recommend it.
Yep, COVID changed a lot of stuff for them. So the sixth option is Hermit Trail. 3 nights and 4 days. We did this in mid-October, and it was actually warmer than it was when we did the rim to rim in 2015 in early October. So we started at Hermits Rest, hiked down, and we stayed 2 nights at Monument Creek. We did that because the next day was going to be a really long hike to Indian Garden, and we wanted to do a side hike down to Granite Rapids. And then from Indian Garden, we stayed 1 night and up to the South Rim. Best times, I think, are May, late September through October. We hiked a total of 22 miles, not including the side hikes, and you needed a backcountry permit for this. It's a little bit easier to get the permit just because the Monument Creek isn't as popular as a corridor, but we still had to get an Indian Garden permit. So we took a shuttle. We started off a little late for this because I had read online that it was going to take like 6 hours to hike from Hermits Rest to Monument Creek, and I'm like, oh, that's usually a pretty conservative guess. It was not. So 6.3 miles. The trail was pretty well marked, even though it wasn't one of the corridor trails. We started out at a pretty steep down climb, but then we had to go up a little bit as well sometimes. We got to Santa Maria Spring, which if you needed to fill up your water bottle, you could. I would definitely filter it. And they also had a resting area if you wanted to stay for a bit. It's not a corridor trail, so we did have some challenges. There was a couple spots where we had to cross over the boulders like this. It was just a beautiful day and hike. We got down to the Tonto Trail, and according to the information we got, it was supposed to be a plateau, and it was commonly referred to as a Tonto Plateau My Ass Trail because it was not very flat. We got close to Monument Creek right about sunset. You can see there's a rock formation there. We're like, oh, that's got to be Monument Creek. And it was still probably another 20 to 30 minutes before we got to the camp. And it was dark by the time we got there. We had to find the empty campsite and set up tents. We stayed 2 nights here, like I said. We used a rack sack because they don't have the ammo boxes for food. Our first night, it was so dark that when we went to bed, it was just pitch black. But about 3 a.m. or maybe before, it just shone. It was like someone was shining a light on our tent, and it was just the full moon that came over the edge of the canyon. The biffies here were not as private as the corridor trails. And we had met some geologists, and we spent part of the day, our day with them, down to Granite Park or Granite Rapids. And we just had to down a trail, and then this is just the wash that gets you down there. And this is Granite Rapids. We were hoping to see some rafters come through. And we stayed in the shade and watched and just enjoyed reading. We never saw any rafters. So we headed back up to our campsite, 1.6 miles, about 700 feet elevation gain. The next day we were heading almost 11 miles to Indian Garden. It's pretty steep out of Monument Creek. And we got up a ways and we could see the campsite. You could see someone's shirt, red shirt down here. Still had to watch your step though. And then in certain parts, there was cairns to make sure you knew where the trail was. Some more cactus along the way. And we spotted the Colorado River again. It's hard not to. And we spotted a rafter down here. So we did see a raft, but not when we were down at the rapids. There's another couple campsites along here, but you have to bring your water because there's either no water source or the water source is polluted with uranium.
Yeah.
We stayed at Indian Garden. And we headed back to the South Rim. Saw some deer down there again. And then we were almost to the top. You can see a tunnel up here, and we'd been passed by some horses and mules going down. And what they tell you is when you see them, get off to the inside of the trail and don't make loud noises or don't move fast. And just if the lead rider tells you instruction, follow that instruction. That'd be it. Questions?
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions,
Is there any?
let us know.
Just wondering, do those Indians down there, do they grow plants down there? How do they, how do they survive? I know they have supplies with the mules coming down, but do they grow things there?
Unfortunately, I don't think they do grow a lot of fresh vegetables and stuff. They used to, but I didn't see a lot of evidence of that. And the irrigation channels seem to be disused. So I'm not sure they do. Traditionally, they would spend the summer down in the canyon, and then the winter they would go up on the plateau to go hunting. And they did get more of their reservation expanded, I think back in the 70s, to the plateau. But I don't think they do a lot of the traditional ways. I don't know that they grow a lot of stuff, but I'm not sure. I'd like to spend more time down there and know more about it.
What's the best advice for novice hikers, campers to see the canyon?
Well, I think the best advice would be to go, like we say, go to the south or north rim. You can, the south rim is fairly easy to get to. You can stay in Flagstaff if you want to stay in a hotel. I think there's hotels right outside the south entrance too. And then you can go and you can hike along the rim, or go to the north rim and you can go camping. I mean, there's a lot of options. Going down into the canyon and getting permits is obviously a little more challenging. We tried to get permits 2 or 3 times before we got them, and then we got exactly what we wanted when we did the rim to rim.
And we just put multiple, I think we had 5 itineraries on that on the rim to rim one, and we got our first choice. Someone asked what our favorite trip is. They're all so different. I really liked the rim to rim because it was challenging, but I mean, Havasupai is so pretty. I mean, all the waterfalls and down there.
And we have done more than 6 trips down there, but the 6 are just kind of different options. I think the most beautiful is Havasupai. The downside of Havasupai or Supai is there's not a lot of hiking trails down there besides going to the river and back. They don't like you to just hike over hike all over the place because it's kind of private property. And, some places, some of their ancestors are buried and stuff like that. So there's not a lot of hiking trails besides going down to the river, but it is a beautiful place.
Just in the cabins.
We've stayed at cabins on the North Rim, and there was a pretty good selection. The only thing we've done at the South Rim is actually camp. So I'm not sure about cabins on the South Rim, but the North Rim, they had a pretty good selection.
And the cabins are for 3 people. So there's a twin bed and a double bed in the cabin. And when we stayed there, it was there was no hot water. But
what is your favorite trip?
that's what we just answered.
Well, the other thing I want to mention on that though is Indian Garden is just beautiful. If you just even just hiking down Indian Garden and staying a few nights and hiking back up, it's just, yeah, I mean, it's just beautiful down there. There's a lot of big trees and there's wildlife down there, and it's just, they got the shelters that you can get shade under. Indian Garden is just beautiful. But you didn't mention the rat.
I know. Guess you didn't want me to.
Oh, didn't I?
So we actually, when we were staying at Indian Garden, there was right before bed, we saw a rat, which turned into a pack rat because in the middle of the night, I heard my sunglasses being dragged across the picnic bench away. And so if you ever see a rat in Indian Garden with sunglasses, those are mine.
Yeah, they tend to collect stuff. I'm trying to look through these other questions here. Doesn't scroll very well. What is title, author of book you referred to? I have a number of books. But...
The one around the Grand Canyon.
Oh, shoot. What did I do? All right. Answer some of the other questions.
Yeah. That's Havasu Creek, the Havasupai Creek that's blue. Is that right?
Yeah, Havasu Creek.
Havasu Creek. We're planning a 7th trip. Not quite yet. We have so many other places that we want to go to. How much water did we need to carry? On the rim to rim and stuff, you only have to really carry enough water to get you to the next water point. So when we were heading up the Bright Angel Trail, because there's different parts, different points that have water, we didn't have to carry a ton. So I think we both had 2 quarts with us.
I think we carried some extra. Havasupai, did we carry more than 2 quarts?
We did, yes. When we were going to go to the Colorado River, we carried 3 quarts.
Yeah, but then we're dunking in the river, in the creek a lot of the time, so you're not sweating so much, so you don't need to be drinking so much water. The book that I had, which was the book about the different places around the Grand Canyon, was The Photographer's Guide to the Grand Canyon by John Anarino.
You can put it in chat if you want.
Yeah, I could, couldn't I suppose?
Why was the creek such a different color than the Colorado? I think it was the calcium carbonate is what we heard. So, and it was just beautiful. It just looked like a cartoon type of color. Oh, yep. Roger put it in there. So you're good.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Roger. Any other questions?
So you mostly just filtered water from the river, or do they have? There's no running water right anywhere.
Well,
There is.
when we
Where's
went
there?
to
Where's there?
Monument Creek, we had to filter water. When we were on the main trail, they have faucets where you can get fresh water. If you're on the corridor trails, if you go off the corridor trails out in the backcountry, then you have to find springs and stuff.
Carol asked if they're horseback riding in Supai. No, they have their own horses and they don't give out rides. If you can actually get out of the canyon via helicopter. Sometimes there's some days that you can pay for a helicopter ride to get out, so you don't have to hike the 8 miles up.
Or you can get out on a mule too.
Yeah.
You can pay to go out on a mule. And probably if you went down to Supai and you offered someone some money to ride their horse, they'd probably let you. But we chatted to some of the people down there last time we were down there, and that was interesting because we hadn't chatted to them so much before. Any other questions?
Just click on 5 new messages.
All right, 5 new. That takes you right to the bottom.
Thanks, Gary.
Did you have a specific campsite reserved for each campground? For the campgrounds down in the canyon, you just show up and you find a campsite. You don't book a particular campsite. And the interesting thing when we were at whatever the one at the bottom of the North Rim, so they don't limit the number of tents. They limit a number of people. So if you have 8 people there and they all want to have their own tent, they all bring a lot of tents and they try to put a lot of tents on. So there was a bunch of people were supposed to, they booked individual sites, but then when they got there, they went in the group site. But then people showed up for the group site and they all had to move. So it's the way they do it is a little strange.
The group that you sign up with on your application all have to be in one site. So
yeah,
because they do fill each site. It's a popular thing to do, hiking or camping in the Grand Canyon.
Particularly now after a lot of stuff's been closed over the COVID. Yeah, you can go down to Supai by helicopter. Yep. My brother-in-law, when we went down, I wanted to get a helicopter out, but they weren't flying that day.
Gary.
Oh yeah, that is Gary. There you go, Gary. Yeah, you couldn't get your helicopter, so you had to haul your lazy butt up the trail instead. I haven't done any guided hikes, no. So
Thank
the
you, Ben.
West Rim, the West Rim, they do a lot of different guided hikes and whitewater rafting and stuff like that.
So what are your next trips that you're planning?
We don't have any in the Grand Canyon that are planned, but
Yeah, I don't know. Good question. A lot of options. I mean, I'd love to go down to Supai again because it's just so beautiful down there. And there's definitely other options.
Our hotel is closed right now.
yeah.
Yep, it's closed right now.
Well, Jen had said earlier that you weren't going to do any more Grand Canyon trips because you had other trips in mind, and I'm asking which.
So we're heading to England in a month and a half. With Bob and his canal boat. It's not his boat, but we kind of rent it. What others?
Well, we've never been to what's the other a lot of other national parks.
Yosemite and
It's one I'm thinking of. Oh crap, I'm blanking on it.
we do a lot of camping during the summer.
Yellowstone.
Yellowstone, yeah, exactly. Yellowstone. Thanks, Gary. When are you going to organize a trip there that we could come along with?
That was Diane said that, not me.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Diane.
Do you feel trails clear enough to not need great navigation skills? Definitely the corridor trails, if you want to do rim to rim, it's just one straight trail unless you go off on some of the side trails, which still aren't that bad. but most of them I think are pretty, unless you go really out in the backcountry. And then, yeah, you got to be a little more careful.
Yeah, there's a lot more trails in the Grand Canyon that we have not done that are more for, you get the bouldering, you get some rock climbs, and it's just, we have not done that.
Yeah, and you got to be careful of the heat and water depending on when you go. But the rangers are normally pretty good about telling you where, if there's a spring where you can get water, if there's water there at that time of year or whatever. So you can speak to the people in the backcountry permit office or whatever it is.